Hi, I'm April. I am a singer-songwriter and music teacher, and in this video, we are going to be picking apart Billie Eilish's new song, Happier Than Ever, and we're going to be talking about how you can write your own awesome song. Before we get started, make sure to hit all of those buttons around your screen, like, subscribe, the little bell, really you can't go wrong. And be sure to stick around until the end of the video, because we're going to be talking about how you can get a free year of Skillshare Premium. Okay, so let's talk about the song. The way that I've seen this song written out across the internet is just like this. So with verses and choruses and a bridge and an outro, but I don't think this quite accurately represents what I'm hearing as a listener. You'll notice that the section that's labeled chorus only happens twice, and that the song as a whole feels a little bit disjointed. It's almost as if there are two separate songs happening here, and that they just sort of bleed together. So that first section that has our chorus and our first verse really feels like one song, and then the rest of it, that second verse, the bridge, and the outro, all feel like something completely different. Not only is there a huge instrumental change and a change in kind of the overall tone and emotion of the song, but there's also a time signature change. We go from being in 4/4 time, which sounds like this, to 6/8 time, which sounds like this. So as we write our own songs, we're gonna have to pay attention to that shift in the instrumentals, in the time signature, in the emotional tone, but we're also gonna wanna make sure that our two song halves feel cohesive, that there's that sort of fluidity to it. So as we write our outline, I'm actually gonna consider this to be two different songs. And I'm gonna put them both as AABA form instead of listing these as verses and choruses and bridges. This should just make the whole process a little bit easier, and it'll help us to think outside of the box of these different song sections that we kind of have a lot of really specific associations with. Both of our songs are gonna be in the same key though, and we're gonna make sure that both songs start and end on the same chord. That way when we kind of bleed the songs together, it'll feel more fluid and more cohesive. So when I listen to this song, it's pretty obvious that it's a breakup song. And there's definitely this feeling of, I wish there wasn't a breakup happening. So I'm gonna use the main idea, I wish I wasn't better off without you. That way it has that breakup element and it still feels like there's this longing and there's this feeling of pull toward this person, even if you know that they're completely wrong for you. Depending on how much you want it to feel like the Billie Eilish song, and depending on your personal interpretation of the lyrics, you might choose a totally different main idea. And that's completely fine. You don't have to choose the same idea that I do. And remember that as we fill out these outlines, these are just going to be brief summaries of what's happening in each section. These aren't necessarily going to be the actual words we stick with when we create our full lyric. So don't put too much pressure on yourself as you go through this process, because you can totally change things and you'll be able to edit stuff later. So when I went through and listened to the song, these are the ideas that I came up with for each section. When we listen to the first section of this song, it kind of gives me the vibes of like the Great American Songbook or doo-wop. It reminds me a lot of Paul Anka's Put Your Head on My Shoulder, or of A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes from Cinderella. This whole section has a very 1950s sound about it, and this kind of sound hasn't really gone away since the 50s. We've been seeing it a lot in more recent years, in songs like Death of a Bachelor or Dream Suite in C major. Now I'll grant you that this chord progression looks a little scary when we first look at it, but I promise it's not going to be quite as bad as it looks. We're going to start with a really super simple chord progression for each of these sections. And all we're going to do is add a couple of notes here and there to make our chord progressions just a little bit spicier. The first half of the song is based around the super simple chord progression C, A minor, D minor, G. And the second half is going to be based around C, A minor, F. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the C in this chord progression and we're going to turn it into a C add 9. So all that means is that we're counting up the C scale, so C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. and we get to 9, so that's our 9th note. And all we're gonna do is take that D, that 9th note, and just add it to our C major chord. So it's super pretty and it has this really dreamy, nice thing about it. So it fits really nicely into this section of the song. We're also going to make all of the rest of these chords 7th chords, which you can kind of do in the same way that we did the 9th chord. The other fancy fun thing that we're going to do here though is we're going to be using a secondary dominant. We've talked about this here and there on this channel, but basically a secondary dominant is a chord that we place before another chord in order to kind of give us the illusion that that second chord is going to be the one or the home chord. We do this by adding the 5 of that scale right before the chord that we want to sound like the one. So I know that sounds a little bit confusing, but it basically works like this. Our chord progression goes C, A minor, D minor, G. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave a gap right after that C because I want my A minor to sound really intense. So what I'm gonna do is count up my A minor scale, A, B, C, D, E, and I'm gonna take that E and I'm just gonna place it right before my A minor. And then I'm gonna make it a dominant 7th chord. So now our chord progression is going to sound like this. So when I write my song, I'm gonna take this same idea and I'm just going to put it into a totally different chord progression. All I'm gonna do is turn my G into a G add 9, make everybody else 7th chords, and then add a secondary dominant or 2. How about we use that E minor? So we're gonna count up the scale. We have E, F sharp, G, A, and B. So that means we're gonna stick to that B and we're gonna turn it into a B7. And then we're just gonna place that right before our E minor chord. So let's listen to our chord progression now. The second section feels a little bit more like an alt-rock song. So we're gonna take away a lot of those 7th chords, except we're gonna leave one dominant 7th. We also have this lovely F minor chord, which is just a really simple use of modal interchange. And all you have to do in order to use this is take the last chord of your progression and change it to minor halfway through the chord. So the second half of my song might sound like this. Part of the reason I think this song works so well is that it feels like it could plausibly be about her life. The internet loves it when celebrities give details about their personal lives because we want to feel included. We want to feel like we know what's happening in the story. Even if it's not literally about her life, we still want to feel like it could be. So in this song, we get a lot of words that kind of imply her celebrity status. We hear lyrics about how she and her partner have a lot of money, or how people might talk about her on the internet and how she gives interviews. So she doesn't really shy away from the things that are a reality in her life, but which might not be so relatable to someone else. The reason that I think this works is because it's authentic. She doesn't brag about these things, but instead, they just kind of fill in the scenery. And it also allows us as the listeners to feel like we're kind of part of the story. It lets us feel what it would feel like to be in Billie Eilish's shoes. So in writing your own version of the song, let yourself be honest. It doesn't have to necessarily be truthful. Like, you don't have to actually tell us where your breakup happened and what exactly went wrong and your partner's name and date of birth and social security number. Like, it doesn't have to be that actually honest, but it should be emotionally honest. You should be able to give us a sense of what it felt like, or what anyone would feel like in that situation. So start by figuring out what happened in this hypothetical breakup. Maybe it happened in front of your locker in high school, or maybe it was over a phone call or an email, or maybe it was in the car. Maybe it was the protagonist who broke it off, or Maybe it was the partner. So just start thinking about what your characters are like and kind of what their relationship would be to one another. Once you've thought a little bit about the characters and their breakup, start thinking about why they actually broke up in the first place. In the case of this song, it's because our character was being mistreated. If this is the case for your song as well, start making a list of how this main character was being treated poorly. For Billie's song, it might look like this. You overreacted and acted out, your behavior scared me, you weren't aware of how your behavior made me feel, etc. Once you have a list like this, you can start plugging it into your actual song. Now notice here that she doesn't always just say exactly what the thing is from her list, and instead, she goes into a little bit more detail. She adds a bit of scenery to the story. So instead of just saying, you drove drunk and I don't like that, she says, you called me again, drunk in your Benz. It's really subtle, but what she actually does here is that she gives us way more context about the character than just you drove drunk. The word again, for instance, implies that this is something that happens frequently. We also see that it's a Mercedes-Benz, which is a really fancy car. So we see that this character is not only just being reckless in their relationship, they're also being reckless with this really fancy car and with their life. It really drives home the point that this is a person who just doesn't care. So go ahead and add all of these little details, play around with your rhyme scheme and your structure, and just have fun building your outline into a full song. When it comes to recording and production, this song does a lot of the things that I really love about Finneas's production. One of my favorite things that he does in this song is that he leaves in every single one of Billie's breaths. She's also so close to the microphone that it almost feels like she's whispering in your ear. This style of vocal recording really amplifies what's happening in the lyrics. So when you go to record your song, the first section is going to be pretty stripped back and pretty straightforward. Start with whichever harmonic instrument you feel the most comfortable with, whether that be piano, guitar, or ukulele. And then from there, just play around with singing really close to your pop filter. So this is what I came up with for my song.
Lucky I got away, guess I didn't expect it, and I wish I wasn't better off now.
The second half of the song builds kind of slowly. So start off by playing that same instrument in 6/8, and then you're just adding a couple of splashes of things here and there. So the drums don't really start until a tiny bit into that first section, and when they do, it's really just the kick drum at first. That part just builds up a little bit more and more over time. And we also get this kind of drony synth sound that helps us to basically get from that first part into the second part. So the key in this section is really to take your time building things up. You should start super duper simple, and then as you're building, let things swell and swell, and then once you get to this critical mass, strip everything back again.
It's 2 in the morning, you tell me I'm boring, I never let you have any fun. Don't know why I'm exhausted, I never deserve this or any of your sad bullshit.
And then of course there's that massive crescendo, and by the time we end the song, it feels really epic and intense and climactic. Speaking of very intense, epic endings, how would you like a full year of Skillshare Premium? If you've seen this channel at all lately, you know that I have a class on Skillshare, and I'm really stoked about it, and I would love for you to watch it. But I'm also really excited to let you know that I am doing a giveaway. So over the next 2 weeks, if you take my Skillshare class and leave a review, ideally a good one if you like it, you'll be put in the running to win a free year of Skillshare Premium. So if that sounds interesting or fun to you, you can go ahead and follow the link in the description to watch my Skillshare class. And whether you win that free year or not, you will still get a free month of Skillshare Premium just by following that link. And with all that, I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, be sure to let me know in the comments below. leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and of course ring that little bell to be notified the next time I post.